that we are trying to fix.
Would the gentleman yield for question?
Go ahead.
Mr. Correa, thank you for your very passionate and eloquent remarks. What would have happened to you if you had not had access to Pell Grants and Cal Grants and public money to go to school? What would happen to your working class constituents today?
Were you asking me to delve into a personal confession? The gift that my father gave me when I graduated from high school was, he said, can't give you a watch, can't give you something nice, but I can free you. You don't have to help us pay rent or pay the bills. You focus on studying, and that's where that financial aid came into being. This kid from the hood who wasn't quite ready for college was able to make it with that financial aid.
Gentleman's time has expired. Now recognize Mr. Gooden from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the points Mr. Shea was trying to make was that these universities shouldn't be so expensive in the first place. None of us want to take away Pell Grants and loan support, et cetera, financial aid for anyone that needs it. Our point is it shouldn't cost this much in the first place, to the point that we need $400,000, whether it's subsidized or not, to pay for these degrees. I'm curious, Mr. Shea, when you started asking all these questions and making noise at Brown University, what was their response to you?
They were not very happy. The Brown administration told people not to respond to our emails, and then they hit us with a disciplinary investigation, charging me personally for bizarre things such as emotional/psychological harm. Apparently that's a real student code of conduct violation, but I was found not responsible for anything. But they also dragged in the entire board of the Brown Spectator and charged all of us. And luckily we were cleared, but I think this shows that there's rot and they're trying to cover it up.
Isn't that interesting that they had a problem with your free speech and the work you were doing, but they didn't have a problem with the pro-Palestinian encampments and all the anti-Semitism? Isn't that just wildly ironic that they would go after little old you, just a student that's banging the drum and kicking and screaming about high costs, and that pissed them off so much that they started an investigation and came after you, but they didn't have a problem with the anti-Semitism all over their campus?
This is certainly a double standard. In 2023, we saw that a large group of protesters were actually arrested for trespassing. They invaded one of the buildings and they were asked to leave. They didn't leave. They were arrested, and Brown told the prosecutor to drop the charges. They weren't disciplined at all. I think there's a clear double standard here.
Well, I hope you'll keep after it. The fact that the Democrats on this committee are going after you, not hard, I'll give them credit, but trying to nail you down on a Pell Grant question that really doesn't have anything to do with the point we're trying to make here. The point is, if college wasn't so expensive, we wouldn't even need all this financial aid because it wouldn't cost a fortune to go to college. It shouldn't cost $400,000, and kids that can't afford it wouldn't need the aid that they get because they would have aid, but we would need $400,000 of it. And so I hope that every child, every student in America can go to whatever college they want, but they're not going to as long as class sizes are limited and the price tags keep going up. Another interesting tidbit that I have found in all of this is all these endowments. One of my colleagues on the other side said taxpayer money was meant to go towards funding this. If an Ivy League institution has billions of dollars in their endowments, then I'm wondering how much needs to be given to this university with extra taxpayer dollars. Dr. Cooper, will you comment on that?
Absolutely. Some of these Ivy League universities have endowments in the tens of billions. Harvard is an endowment north of $50 billion. And these institutions actually are less likely to provide institutional financial aid than other private colleges with fewer resources.
And yet my colleague over here seems to just be outraged that we would want Harvard or Brown or name your university to use their endowment billions to educate the masses rather than to use taxpayer dollars to further their cost escalations and their price increases. Am I missing something, Dr. Cooper?
I think you're right. Harvard and other Ivy League institutions could certainly be doing a lot more with the tremendous resources they have available to make college more affordable for their students and to expand to more talented students.
Well, I praise your work. I I'm sorry on behalf of my colleagues on the left that seem to be so angry with your exposing of the corruption and the collusion and the exorbitant cost increases of Ivy League educations. I can't hear one peep out of them with respect to the anti-Semitism in these same Ivy League institutions. They're all mad at President Trump for actually standing up against this anti-Semitism that we're seeing. They're mad at President Trump for trying to bring down the cost and saying to these Ivy League institutions, we're not going to keep sending you money of US taxpayer dollars as long as you're helping to propagate this anti-Semitism. They're doing nothing about this. And Democrats are so mad at the president for standing up for the students and for standing up for the taxpayers that they instead are wasting your time going after you. So keep it up, Mr. Shea, Dr. Cooper, Mr. Martin. I appreciate your work, and I encourage you to keep the pressure on Brown, especially Mr. Shea. Don't be discouraged, and know that the American people, the vast majority of the American people, support your efforts, and we stand with you, and we share your views. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. We have a couple of unanimous consent requests. Mr. Correa first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unanimous consent for the, including the following items in our record. First one, Trump is crushing America's AI leadership. We still have time to fix it. April 23rd, 2025.
Without objection.
J.D. Vance wanted to aggressively attack American universities. June 3rd, 2025. Cost of federally sponsored research infographic on the Association of American Universities website.
Without objection.
2022. Benefiting society and the economy, American technology transfer for 2023. Federal R&D cuts would be another unforced policy error. Number 7, America's R&D rethink threatens its innovation supremacy. Number 8, New American Fortune 500 in 2024, American Immigration Council. Number 9, U.S. scientists warn that Trump's cuts will set off brain drain. Number 10, these are the U.S. universities more dependent on international students. And number 11, losing international students could devastate many colleges. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Without objection.
Mr.
I'll
Chairman.
ask unanimous consent to enter the record the following, a Washington Post article titled Students Overpaid Elite Colleges, $685 million, Price Fixing Suit. A press release from Berger Montague titled Plaintiffs in Elite University Price Fixing Case Settle with Caltech and John Hopkins. And then also plaintiff's memorandum of law in support of their motion for class certification in the case of Corzo versus Brown. The gentlewoman from...
Mr. Chairman, I just had one more, if I could.
Oh, go ahead.
It's just for one article entitled, Congressional Republicans' Budget Reconciliation Bill Imperils 4.4 million Pell Grant Recipients.
Without objection. The gentlewoman from Vermont is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We should be able to work together and find bipartisan solutions to this problem. I have 2 teenagers myself. They're starting to look at colleges. I've got sticker shock, as do most parents who go through this process. And I am really worried about all of the talented students who don't even apply, not just because of the tuition or the room and board, but simply the fees in order to apply. It's out of reach for so many families, and the astronomical costs mean working people do not have a fair shot at higher education. I think that is why we have been so vocal today about the cuts to the Pell Grant program. Everyone seems to agree that the high cost of college is a real problem in this country, but we can't seem to agree on how it is that we're going to bring down tuition costs. This is the kind of things that Americans want us to be working on, to the point that my colleague was making here. They want us to come together and actually dig into the problem of how we solve this so that every student has an opportunity to go to college. But that's not actually why we're here today. It's so clear that that's not what this is actually about. Dr. Morgan, I'm so glad that you're here, and I thank you so much for your time. Can you, take us through sort of the crux of what it is that we're supposed to be doing here, which is unpacking all of this? What are the things that are driving these higher costs in education?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It differs really by sector. There are a lot of varied factors that go into college costs, but it really differs by the type of institution and the type of business model. So when we take a look at a for-profit college, they're out to maximize their profit. So the cost of providing the education is actually quite low and doesn't really drive the tuition prices. Their cost of marketing is quite high because they're trying to bring people in the door. When we think about state institutions and community colleges that are educating the majority of students who go to college in this country, studies have shown that the thing that is really driving their costs, or the cost of tuition, is state appropriations. And so that's why I've been quite focused on what federal and state aid, and local aid as well, is going to these colleges, and how what we do at the federal level impacts those state budgets. Because I think we are going to see a squeeze on state budgets that increases the price of tuition. And what we've seen in the past is that it takes a really long time to unwind that, even if we're looking at something that, that only affects a given year.
So what you're saying is true, that if we are not investing in the institutions that most of our students go to, we are compounding the problem.
That's
so
right.
I really appreciate that. When we're talking about the affordability problem, are we talking about all institutions of higher education in the United States, or is it just the Ivies?
I think there's a broad swath of colleges where the tuition is quite high and where they're using these opaque discounting models to get to a net price. But there are a lot of colleges in this country that have held their costs quite low despite, weathering the storms of state budgets and cuts to federal aid, and are really doing their best to provide an education at a transparent price to people where they can come out with as little debt as possible. I do think one thing to think about with that group of institutions and that group of students is how the costs in the rest of those students' lives have gone up.
That's right.
For community college students in particular, they're going to be affected by cuts to things like SNAP. They're also affected by the impact of things like the tariffs and the cost of living increases that's driving for families. So for them, the whole package and their indebtedness to achieve an education is going to be higher because of all of the rising costs that we're seeing right now.
I really appreciate that. It's a complicated problem. It requires a seriousness of purpose and not some sham hearing. My Republican colleagues are not here to seriously investigate the problem of college affordability. They are here to advance Donald Trump's culture war against people and institutions that he doesn't like, and to go after anyone who remotely disagrees with him. He wants to continue to silence the opposition. The reason I know this is because my Republican colleagues, every single one of them across the aisle here, voted to eliminate or reduce student aid, increase monthly student loan payments, and drive students to take out predatory private loans. So this hearing, once again, which we have seen over and over again in this committee, is to do the president's dirty work. We have real work that we should be doing to support our students, but we are preoccupied with going after the president's supposed political enemies. It's a shame, and it's a disservice to our students across this country. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Gentlewoman from Wyoming is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I yield my 5 minutes to the Mr. Niels from Texas.
Thank you, Ms. Hageman. Thank you for our witnesses taking the time to be here. As we've already discussed, the tuition rates at self-proclaimed elite universities have ballooned over the years due to long-standing collusion between them, long-standing collusion. This has allowed these schools to accumulate the kind of severe administrative bloat rarely seen outside of our own federal government. As Dr. Cooper testified, Ivy League universities average 1 non-instructional staff per 2 students. How do you like that ratio? Yet the average private university gets by with 1/3 the administrative staff. And much like we see in the federal government at some point, bureaucracies, they get so big, fat, bloated, that they serve no real purpose other than to justify their own existence. If these elite universities have 1 administrative employee for every 2 students, then what exactly are they employed to do? Well, one of our witnesses, Mr. Alex Shea, decided to ask, great question, Alex, Pursuant to his work as a student journalist investigating administrative bloat at Brown, Mr. Shea emailed all 3,805 non-faculty employees of the university to inquire about what their job entailed, right? Rather than simply respond to the inquiry, Brown chose to initiate disciplinary proceedings against Mr. Shea. I was so appalled when I heard about this that I wrote a letter to Brown urging them to reverse course. I believe our fearless leader, Chairman Jordan, and the committee, they wrote a letter, and Brown reversed course, and I'm glad they did. It's one thing to create a vast, useless administrative bureaucracy to justify an exorbitant tuition rate of $93,000, but to punish a student journalist for daring to ask a question about it is unacceptable. Mr. Shea, what first prompted you to make the inquiry?
That's an excellent question. So Brown has a $46 million budget shortfall, even while charging students the price of a luxury car. And it doesn't seem like they want to cut any administrators. They're having hiring freezes, but they're not willing to cut any jobs. So I thought this was something that needed to be looked into.
Why do you think the employees at your email, they didn't answer your questions? Many of them didn't respond?
Well, some of them answered, and the ones who answered seemed to have pretty useful jobs. So I guess we can maybe infer that the ones who didn't have jobs that are not so important.
The ones that didn't were too embarrassed. They were too embarrassed. They weren't going to respond to you. Why do you think elite schools like Brown might be more frugal in administrative spending if they had to pay the same 21% tax rate on their endowment profits as corporations?
Certainly. I mean, when you have to pay higher taxes, there's less money floating around, and you got to tighten the budget.
Now that's beautiful. We put it in reconciliation now. So these universities, it was 1.4. Now it's going to go to 21%. 21%. I'm so excited that legislation was in our reconciliation. How about you, Dr. Cooper? What do you think?
I think that the 21% tax on endowments will probably induce some belt tightening among these Ivy League institutions. And I would also note that the tax is structured such that if you expand your enrollment, you face a lower tax rate. And that might be an inducement that some of these colleges need to actually admit more qualified students from middle-income backgrounds.
Well, let me be clear. We're not actually taxing the endowment itself. It's the net profits, the earnings on their investments. And we're expecting $7 to $10 billion annually. $7 to $10 billion. It's a big deal. Mr. Cooper, the average four-year private university costs around $35,000 per student, while the Ivy Leagues average $126,000. To what degree is administrative bloat attributed to this?
I can't imagine that most of that extra $126,000 in spending per student is really going to benefit students. What we see is much higher administrator to student ratios at Ivy League institutions than other private colleges.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hageman. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and the gentlewoman from Wyoming's time is yielded back. I now recognize the gentleman from Illinois for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This hearing highlights a real problem, the crisis of affordability in higher education. But instead of focusing on systemic issues and solutions, Republicans have chosen a narrow and misleading target, the Ivy League, which enrolls less than 1%, half of 1% of all undergraduate students. It's been stated before. Rising costs are not unique to the Ivy League. Over the last 2 decades, tuition and fees at private and public universities have increased by over 100%. So this problem isn't limited to antitrust violations by the Ivy League. It's a problem that affects working families, regardless of which school students attend. And this problem is rooted in the commodification of education. Many schools have become real estate trusts and hedge funds that treat education as an afterthought. They game the ranking system by jacking up tuition, offering discounts in the form of financial aid, knowing that they can exploit the student loan program and load their students with debt. This model has been a disaster for students and for our economy. Higher education is becoming more essential and more unaffordable. Over 40 million people hold nearly $2 trillion in debt. And Black and Latino students Immigrant students and first-generation students in particular are being priced out of opportunity. So in addition to antitrust enforcement, Congress must act. And we should consider policy options like tuition-free public college, caps on tuition increases, increased need-based aid, reforms to the student loan system, and support for trade and vocational schools. Not everyone needs to go to college. But if Republicans were serious about affordability, we'd see policy solutions. We don't see that. Instead, we see culture wars. Let's talk about what they actually do. Ms. Morgan, thank you for being here. Let me ask you a simple yes or no question. Does gutting the Department of Education lower tuition costs?
It does not.
Thank you. Does cutting research funding for universities lower tuition costs?
It does not.
Does cutting financial aid programs and student debt relief lower tuition costs?
Definitely does not.
Does suppressing free speech and enforcing a Trump-approved ideology lower tuition costs?
It does not.
Thank you. And as usual, Republicans are pretending to be firefighters when they're actually arsonists. We need to address the cost of higher education, but nothing in their cruel reconciliation bill does that. So this hearing is just a hypocritical distraction. Republicans fight culture wars, they manufacture outrage, and funnel taxpayer dollars to billionaires and to ICE while defunding higher education, programs that help working class students, those that I represent in Congress, and other vital resources for our communities. Working families and our communities deserve better. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you that are on the panel today for your testimony. We've been in and out of other committee meetings, but I did have the privilege of reading your written testimonies in advance, and I do want to just ask you a couple of questions. You know, for decades, elite universities were protected by the antitrust exemption under the understanding that they were going to provide these need-blind financial aid, which they arguably are not. And so, Mr. Martin, I want to go to you first. In your view, did the exemption do anything meaningful to bring down colleges' cost to make colleges' expense more accessible?
I've not studied that, Congressman, but I'm aware of nothing.
Okay. We really, I think, have seen what 30 years of colluding about the financial aid formulas did to college affordability and accessibility, but the exemption expired in 2022. So my question again, Mr. Martin, would be to you, if we want students to be offered the best college experience at the lowest possible price, should Congress enact another antitrust exemption like Section 568 or force the schools to compete against one another?
As an antitrust lawyer, Congressman, the free market is generally the best tool for solving problems of prices.
Well, and I too, I believe that competition would play a role in bringing down college costs. And we have data from the last 30 years that the antitrust exemption only succeeded in making our elite institutions more elite and further remove the needs of everyday Americans. So thank you for your response. I want to go to Mr. Shia. And Mr. Shia, you caused quite a stir with your email to Brown's employees. Your efforts to shine a light on Brown University's excess mirrors our fight in Congress to cut wasteful spending as we're dealing with it day in and day out. Can you, I don't want to give you a chance to explain your motivation for shining a light on what you describe as administrative bloat.
Exactly. Well, I think the root of the problem is that Brown is just so darn unaffordable for students all across the country, and that's why Brown has the richest median income of all the Ivy League schools. Like I said, half of the Brown student body is from the top 5% of Americans, and I just think that's wrong. I think that's morally wrong because the Ivy League is supposed to be a ladder to the American dream, but we're pulling up the ladder so that only rich kids can access it, and I think that's wrong.
And I noticed in your written testimony that you pointed out there's roughly a ratio of 1 administrator for every 2 students. And I got to ask you, is this necessary for Brown students to obtain a degree?
Certainly not. We've seen that in the past. Brown didn't have this ratio, and it has functioned fine for hundreds of years. Across the pond, Oxford and Cambridge don't have that many administrators, and they function fine. Certainly, all these administrators are not necessary.
And I would say, does this number of administrators meaningfully impact the overall experience of Brown students?
Certainly not, and they might even detract from it, because when budget cuts need to be made, the enormous administrative bloat means that, and their unwillingness to reduce it means that the costs have to be cut somewhere else.
Right. So, and which leads you almost answer my other question, is how could cutting some of the bloat benefit the consumer that's looking to come to Brown?
Well, absolutely. Like dorms flood, the food is unappetizingly bad, and the quality just keeps getting worse. Like they're reducing red meat from all the dining halls. They say it's about the environment, but it's really about the cost. And by reducing administrative bloat, we definitely could see some improvements in the student experience.
Thank you. Dr. Cooper, let me ask you, you said in your written testimony that, quote, the surplus revenues that Ivy League institutions enjoy currently fuel administrative bloat, but they could be used to create more seats for qualified applicants. Can you explain the benefits for our entire nation that could come from increased enrollment at these elite institutions?
Absolutely. Right now, if you look at elite institutions graduates, they are vastly overrepresented in the elites of business, politics, and media. And if we were to expand Ivy League undergraduate colleges to more students, that would enable more students to get their foot in the door for this pipeline and enable, a greater diversity of folks in those elite positions. So I would love to see Ivy League institutions use their endowments, use all the money they're currently spending on administration to expand and create opportunity for more of those students.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all of you for shining the light that you're shining today. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back without objection. I ask unanimous consent to enter the record the following. A press release from the Department of Justice titled Consent Decree Settles Charge of Conspiracy to Restrain Price Competition on Financial Aid Against Major Universities, and an article by Saja Sarda titled How to Crush the Ivy League Cartel, and finally a document number 753-18 filed in the case of Henry versus Brown University on December 16, 2024. We now recognize the gentleman from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's be clear, everybody. There is no 568 antitrust exemption thanks to the Biden administration. And as far as Mr. Xi's testimony is concerned, Brown did not discipline Mr. Xi, contrary to his report. And also, Mr. Xi's numbers in terms of administration staff for Brown University are incorrect. So, and I'm surprised that you would pull up the ladder for students who are going to regular universities and colleges, prevent them from getting financial aid. That's crazy. But at any rate, Donald Trump and his MAGA Republican supporters in Congress are attacking our elite institutions of higher learning because these institutions and others produce the critical thinkers who stand opposed to the global trend towards authoritarianism and dictatorship, which Donald Trump and MAGA represent. They say this hearing is about 8 Ivy League institutions and the cost of higher education, but that is just a facade. This is really about Trump's war on facts, debate, and truth. This is Trump's attack on academia, which comes straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Universities are full of smart, young, engaged people, and the institutions are committed to freedom of inquiry and diversity of thought. Universities provide independent sources of information and accountability. Indeed, individuals with higher levels of education are less likely to be tricked by authoritarian appeals. So any autocrat or dictator who wants to exercise limitless, arbitrary power sees independent institutions of higher education as a threat. After all, Donald Trump can't replace our democracy with a dictatorial regime if the people are smart enough to recognize that he is a threat to freedom, liberty, and justice, which our democracy guarantees. Dr. Morgan, I believe that academia is inextricably tied to our democracy and to our liberty. Can you talk about why higher education is important for the protection of freedom and democracy?
Absolutely. First of all, our institutions of higher learning are places where people come together and learn and have to, kind of be in the same place as people with different opinions. So it really promotes democratic values from the start. But to your point, universities can also be a place of free inquiry that can result in, information that can oppose or point out flaws in larger societal trends or political trends. So they can be really important voices in our societies. They're also places that produce research that can help us better understand what's happening in the world around us, including what's happening, the kind of effects of the negative changes that a presidential administration might be putting in place. So they're incredibly important to our democracy and to our society.
Thank you. As a lawyer, I've watched with horror as a number of law firms bent a knee and succumbed to Donald Trump's unlawful pressure campaign. But I'm proud of the brave firms that chose to stand up for the rule of law. Now, as Trump goes after the universities, I'm equally concerned. In March, Columbia University caved to Trump's demands when the administration threatened to yank away $400 million in federal funding. Yet, more recently, Harvard is showing backbone in rejecting Trump's demands. Dr. Morgan, why is it important that universities stand up against the administration's attacks? And conversely, what would happen if universities succumbed and started towing the line for this administration?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important that universities follow the law, but do not submit to demands that have nothing to do with their legal requirements. You can see in the attacks on Harvard and the kind of proposed solutions from the Trump administration that they're looking to really control the minutia of the decisions at those colleges. That's not an appropriate role for the federal government to take. I think the other thing that's important to understand here is that other universities are going to take their cues from what these much better resourced institutions are able to do in terms of standing up to the administration. So it's really important for those universities that have the resources to do so to take a stand.
So attacking elite institutions is a canary in the coal mine.
That's right.
All institutions of higher learning are under attack.
That's right.
Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shea, what did you say tuition was again at Brown, annual tuition?
It's $93,064 in direct costs.
93, and that doesn't count room and board and books and everything. That's just tuition, right?
No, that's including room and
That's
board.
everything? Okay, $93,000. How many students you say again was at Brown? Over 7,000, I think you said?
7,000.
Yeah, so that's a lot of money coming in. Maybe it could be some grants, it could be some aid, it could be some, loans, whatever, but 93,000 times 7, it's like $700 million coming into Brown every year. And you asked a fundamental question, sort of simple question. You asked the question, where the heck's all the money going, right? And you said, maybe I'll check the administrators. How many administrators have? And you said, I think the number you said was 3,805, is that right?
Yep.
And then you sent a letter to these guys asking another fundamental question. What do you do all day? And what was the response you said? Most of them didn't get back with you?
Most of them didn't respond, and we were hit with disciplinary charges.
So the administrators couldn't respond to a simple question. You're taking in $700 million a year. What the heck are you 3,800 administrators doing The administrators didn't respond, but the administration came after you. Is that right?
That's right. When you investigate the administration, it turns out they investigate you back.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me because the ranking member of the full committee and the ranking member of the subcommittee talked about academic freedom and the First Amendment. You were asking these questions on behalf of a student news publication, right?
Right.
Was it Brown, what's the name of your paper? Brown Spectator?
Yep.
And they come after you. Why do you think they did that? Why did they come after? Well, first of all, what did they come after you about? What did you allegedly do wrong?
Well, first it was emotional and psychological harm, invasion of privacy, and misrepresentation. And then they decided to charge me with violating the technology policy.
Asking someone how they spend your money is emotional harm? That's what they alleged?
Apparently.
And then what happened in the investigation?
Well, then they escalated and they charged the entire board of directors of the Brown Spectator for violating Brown's trademark because our publication is named the Brown Spectator, which is just a completely bogus claim. And
Are there other newspapers that Brown would use Brown in the name of the paper?
Yes, our other newspapers, the Brown Daily Herald.
Probably in the entire history of the university, there's been some kind of Brown publication, right?
Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, that's just ridiculous. Why do you really think they did it? Why did they really come after you?
I think that they were upset that we unveiled the rot that was going on. All these administrators with pretty useless jobs, and
that's certainly one reason they were mad at you. But I think it's probably more. I think they were trying to make sure no one else would do it in the future. That's always the way it works. The left comes after people. They want to chill speech so it doesn't happen again. Do you think that was part of their motivation?
I think that certainly was true, but it backfired terribly.
Sure did, because you're brave enough to keep talking. You can come here and testify, so God bless you for doing that. Now, you can have, I'll direct this to you, Mr. Martin, you can have a bloated bureaucracy when you're colluding on price and making sure you're not competing on price with other similarly situated institutions. Is that right, Mr. Martin?
Yes.
And you're not supposed to do that, are you, according to the law? Is that right, Mr. Martin?
To collude on price, it's per se unlawful.
It's per se unlawful. And you can also
unlawful.
have bloated bureaucracy when you collude on price and you limit output, you limit class size. Is that right, Mr. Martin?
That's correct.
And do you think that's going on at these? There's a third one. You can also do all this if you engage in perfect price discrimination, where you get all this information on the student and their families, what they make, where it goes, what they owe, what their retirement is, all this information. You can say, that student can pay this amount, and you'll take it right to the edge where they can pay and get perfect price discrimination. So when you do those three things, you can afford to have 3,805 administrators for 7,000 students. Is that right, Mr. Martin?
You make an excellent point. The more perfect the information, the more perfect the collusion can be, algorithmically or otherwise.
Of course, and that's exactly what's going on. Is that right, Dr. Cooper?
The evidence is certainly consistent with that, yes.
That's what the evidence shows. And yet the other side says, oh, how dare Mr. Fitzgerald have this hearing? You got to be kidding me. They tried to chill the speech of a news publication at the university for a student they're supposed to be serving, asking a simple and fundamental question. And they want to chill that because they don't want anyone to look under the covers and see that they're colluding on price, they're limiting output, and they're doing perfect price discrimination. Imagine that. Imagine that. And we're not supposed to have a hearing? Holy cow. I want to thank the chairman for doing the hearing. I want to thank all of you for testifying. And Mr. Shea, thank you for stepping forward and letting the country know what's going on at these elite universities.
What would the gentleman yield for a quick
I
question?
yield back to the chairman. I'll yield. You got.
Well, I just wonder if your feelings are the same about the attacks on a private student publication called the Harvard Law Review taking place by the Trump administration right now.
Well, I think the chairman or the ranking member knows that you and I have been strong defenders of the press. We have co-sponsored together the Press Act, defending the press. I will continue to do that, but I'm focused on the situation in front of us today, Mr. Shea at Brown University.
I'm with you. Hold the thought, and more power to the free press at Brown and at Harvard.
God bless America.
Gentlemen's time has expired. That concludes today's hearing. We want to thank our witnesses.
I have a unanimous consent request.
Oh, Mr. Nadler has a UC request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article entitled Ivy League Schools Financial Aid from the Ivy Coach Daily. And it says, moreover, while the sticker price at the Ivy League schools is high, about $90,000 per year, roughly half of the students receive financial aid with average awards covering 2/3 or more of the cost. The vast majority of students from Ivy League schools graduate with no loans. Half of the Ivy League schools offer a completely free education to families whose incomes are $75,000 or less.
Is that the title or the whole article? That's the whole article, yeah.
And I have
Without objection.
a second unanimous consent request, shorter. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from Chicago Booth Review titled, Who's at Fault for Student Loan Defaults, that argues that this article reviews research that analyzes student loan defaults and finds that for-profit colleges, half of the student loan defaults are from programs that only enroll 10% of U.S. students. Furthermore, the review argues that default rates are not being driven by tuition costs.
Without objection. That concludes today's hearing. I want to thank the witnesses for appearing before the committee today. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses and additional materials for the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.